In this daily drop, I'm going to address some of the comments and reactions from yesterday's episode regarding the interview setup in Vancouver, BC. So let's go. All right, everybody, here we are, and just a few days away for me in terms of getting on an airplane and heading to Las Vegas, Nevada for NAB 2024. I've got 8 more episodes after this of the Daily Drop to shoot and edit before I head on out. And also, this Wednesday, the 10th of April, yes, at 3 p.m. Pacific time, is the pre-NAB episode of Camera and Flask. So if you're watching this before Wednesday, April 10th, just know that that's coming up. And today, I thought, because there's obviously going to be a lot of announcements coming out over the next few days, and probably some of the episodes addressing those, and then some other things I have here in the barn that I want to talk about. I wanted to address some comments and reactions to the interview setup that I showed in yesterday's episode. Now, I will preface this by saying that I don't disagree with some of the comments and reactions regarding where neg fill should be, where fill should be. It is somewhat subjective, but the two things I want to talk about in regards to that interview setup, and to a certain degree the setup I had, which was the first setup we did for 2 interviews with talent sitting in front of windows, is this. Number one is the tone and the purpose of the videos that you're creating. And number 2 is the client and what they're looking for in terms of look and feel. So while I tend to lean towards a greater ratio between the key side and the fill side for most of the stuff that I do, it is very oftentimes very appropriate to have higher key or flatter lighting based on A, the content you're creating, and B, what the client is looking for. Now, before I went up to Vancouver, one of the things that we did is we looked at prior content that had been created for that particular client. And one of the references that we had were the headshots, the company headshots for the employees. And that clued us in, along with the fact that this is tech, it was an animation company. All of the things were leaning towards a little bit of a brighter look, a little bit more of a high key look, a little bit of a bringing that key light closer to camera as opposed to split lighting or Rembrandt lighting. And it was also very clear that in the company headshots that they use clamshell lighting. So I leaned more towards that. Now, I will say this. When we were setting up the interviews that we were doing by the windows, the one with me in the shot looks very different. It was a completely different time of day, so on and so forth. I just kind of threw the lights on and did a little to camera stuff. When we did those ones by the windows, I actually had more of a ratio between the key light and the fill side for talent. And my client jumped in immediately and said, no, more fill, which is when we kind of created this formula of a relatively large 48-inch softbox and then this large sound blanket, that one that you see in the shot, and that basically filling in the rest of that side. Now, the neg that you see in the shot was actually being used for 2 reasons. Number 1 was to flag some of the light that was coming in through the windows that we didn't want. And then number 2, we actually moved it to the position you see here because the interviewer, my client, was sitting in a chair and we were seeing that person's reflection in the door behind talent. So I just moved it in a way that it didn't affect the key light very much, but it eliminated those reflections that were happening in the door, and then also that light that was coming in from outside. So it did a couple of jobs, and that's really all there is to it. You've got to make the client happy. You create the look and feel that they're looking for, and that's also appropriate to the content you're creating. Again, I don't disagree with the comments. I love neg, and I love using negative fill, and I love creating more ratio between key and fill side, but it's not always appropriate for the job that you're doing. So no excuses. It's just the reality of doing production and giving the client what they want. And I'm still happy with the frames. I think that the A and the B look good. They accomplished what we needed them to do. And for that third interview, we needed to make sure it looked completely different than the ones that were being shot with the outside and the windows behind talent. That's what I got for you. Don't forget to. And I'll see you on the next episode of The Daily Drop.